Good morning and welcome to NYSE TV Live. I'm Kristen Schuller here in studio above the iconic trading floor. Well, it is Election Day in America, and voters are taking to the polls in what is one of the most historic races of our lifetime. The NYSE and its parent company, Intercontinental Exchange, encourage you to vote using your voice to shape our democracy. Well, alongside the election, investors are tuned into what is a busy week of corporate earnings and the Federal Reserve's next interest rate decision coming on Thursday. It's the first full week of trade in November, and the rest of the year will likely be shaped by how the balance of power shakes out in Washington. Yes, the presidential race, but also Congress. Let's take a look at what's on tap in today's show. With Election Day officially upon us, I'll be joined by a seasoned market expert to talk through what is at stake. Plus, if you haven't already voted, an election official will give us the ins and outs for those heading to the polls today. And with Hyatt Hotels set to ring the opening bell, you see the signage behind me, we will take a look at corporate travel with the CEO of Navan Expense. Well, stocks are set to open fractionally higher as Americans decide the future of the United States. And joining me now with more on what this election means for markets is Sam Stovall. He's a chief investment strategist at CFRA. Sam, it's great to have you, especially on a very important day. And let's dive right in. What does matter most to markets when it comes to this election?
Good morning, Kristen. Well, basically, I think that the markets are looking for a split outcome, meaning that they would like to have the president be of a different party from either house of Congress. Usually, as goes the presidency, so goes the House. And it looks like that might be the case this time as well. But I think that because both candidates have proposals that will likely increase the debt level, increase the likelihood that inflation will take longer to go down to the 2% level. I think most people would like to see a split Congress in the end.
We had seen a very strong run for stocks. Of course, the second year of this bull market up more than 30%. The S&P and the Dow having their strongest weekly win streak of this year. That wrapped up in early October, and we've seen some give back. Are investors pushing pause as we wait to see how these results play out?
Yes, I think they are, because when you look to the daily trading going back to World War II for each of the elections, looking at the day before, you see a slight positive move. The day of the election, ditto. But then the few days afterward, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, following the election, we tend to see the market decline on average. Certainly this time will be no different, probably even more magnified, because we won't know until Thursday, Friday, or even next week who the actual winner was. So Wall Street does not like uncertainty, and not surprisingly, therefore, November has been the most volatile month of any election year going back over 21 elections.
Yeah, we didn't see much volatility in September, maybe a tiny bit toward the end of October, Sam. How could these possible election outcomes impact stocks into year end?
Well, I think that until we find an ultimate winner, volatility will certainly be present. However, history says once the uncertainty has been lifted, no matter who gets elected, then Wall Street tends to focus on the future, and the market does tend to advance with all sizes, styles, and sectors posting average positive returns.
Well, we see the S&P 500 up about 20% year to date. Is that typical performance that we would see for this index during an election year?
Absolutely not. It's much stronger than we have traditionally seen. Usually an election year is a good year. The third year of the four-year presidential cycle is by far the best. The presidential election year is not bad itself, but we did get a pretty good indicator early on this year because it was election year and we saw the market up in January. 100% of the time that has happened, the market was higher, and the average gain was 16%. And this year, we've even surpassed that.
So we've seen growth slow down a little bit, Sam. Certainly the GDP numbers have indicated that, but consumer sentiment remains strong. What is your expectation as we enter what is well known on Wall Street as the strongest 6 months stretch that does run from November through April.
Well, you're absolutely right. November through April is the strongest 6 month stretch, going back again to World War II, not only in average price change, but also in frequency of advance, sort of like a batting average of positive moves. Traditionally, we have seen the best performers be the more cyclical sectors like consumer discretionary, industrials, materials, and technology. And I think that this time around we'll probably end up seeing the same because earnings are expected to be advancing in the mid-teens in 2025.
So it sounds like, Sam, even though we could see some volatility throughout November, it doesn't necessarily sound like investors should be bracing for wild gyrations in stocks this week. Is that right?
Not wild gyrations, certainly, but some slight movements up and down during the day. But I think what you're also asking is, should investors essentially be sitting on their hands? Don't let their emotions become their portfolio's worst enemy. And I would agree wholeheartedly with that.
Yeah. So I want to talk about what can fuel growth going ahead. Obviously, we need to see how the balance of power shakes out in Washington. And based on what you're telling me, gridlock is the ideal scenario. But as these corporate earnings continue to come in and we await that Fed decision on Thursday, what is going to take stocks higher and continue this bull market?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said interest rates, because obviously the market does very well when the cost of capital is lower. Our expectation is that the Fed will cut rates this week by 25 basis points. We'll cut again in December and then 4 more times in 2025. So taking a moderate approach to easing their interest rate cycle, that should lead to about 14% earnings growth in 2025, a similar number for 2026. And if we also remain, in a sense, the best house on the block when it comes to global stock markets, I think that would be beneficial as well.
And just to be clear, of course, we've heard Fed Chair Jerome Powell say many times that the Fed is independent of the Oval Office. How this election day plays out in America, do you anticipate that that would have any impact on that Fed decision on Thursday?
Well, there have been 8 times since World War II that the Fed did make a rate change in the July through October period leading up to the election. And only in 2 of those times could you remotely say that it had an impact on the election itself. So in general, I would say no, the Fed typically does like to exert its independence, but in the end, it really had no impact on the election.
Sam, thank you so much for joining. You're going to join us again, I hope, at 9:30, just after the market opens. That's Sam Stovall, Chief Investment Strategist at CFRA. All right, well, according to reports, the election is a true toss-up between both candidates, former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. Both candidates spent yesterday making their final push to voters in the battleground state of Pennsylvania. So much is at stake in this election. And up next, I'll be joined by political expert J.D. Durkin with more on what is taking shape this election day.
Together, we achieve greatness.
A house divided against itself cannot stand.
Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. I am free.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Hello and welcome to today's edition of The Exchange, brought to you by the New York Stock Exchange. I am live on the floor with my friend Simeon Hyman. He's Global Investment Strategist at ProShares. Simeon, thank you for stopping by.
Thanks for having me.
I can't believe I'm saying this. We're coming up on the 3-year anniversary, of BITO, B-I-T-O. That's the ProShares Bitcoin ETF. How's it going?
You were here with me. October 2021.
I remember we were staring at the screens behind us. We were excited.
The volume was off the charts. I think we had about $1 billion in the first 4 hours.
Yeah.
The fund has continued to prosper, and we keep moving. We now have the most crypto-linked ETFs as in addition to BITO.
So let's stay on the ETF. You know, we talk a lot about the benefits of the ETF wrapper. Are there benefits to the idea of Bitcoin in an ETF?
Sure. Let's start with the ETF itself. You can buy and sell in a brokerage account. You don't need a wallet. Now you have the futures, which are a regulated space as opposed to the loosely regulated spot markets and third-party providers, and you have a qualified custodian. But you bring up a second point, which is important, the distinction between our futures-based ETF and the spot Bitcoin ETFs. BITO is a 40 Act fund as opposed to the spot Bitcoin ETFs, which are 33 Act funds, and some folks do want a registered investment company or a RIC alternative. You also have options on BITO, very important. There aren't options on the spot, guys, and it's a robust spot market, the largest of the crypto link space. And again, that regulated futures market is important.
It is, and you know, as you mentioned, the options market, I mean, boy, options have just been booming this year. We're seeing it message and traffic. I want to take us forward, though. So it's been 3 years since BITO has been listed here at the New York Stock Exchange. What else have you been working on over that time?
We're up to 10 crypto-linked ETFs in our suite. We're super...
Good morning and welcome back to NYSE TV Live. I'm Kristen Scholler here in studio at the New York Stock Exchange. Well, election day is here. The final votes of the 2024 race are being cast, and the race is a true toss-up according to AP News. Well, 7 battleground states will decide the outcome, barring any surprises today. And joining me now with what could follow is political expert and CBS News contributor, JD Durkin. JD, thank you so much for joining on a busy day.
Certainly a busy day, a historic day. No one I would rather have this conversation with on election morning than you, Krista. We've done this a few elections now. It's great to be with you again.
You are exactly right. And so let's talk about the historic nature, just how historic this particular race is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I learned this yesterday. This is the 60th presidential election we've ever had. We don't think about the numbers in those terms. We tend to think about how many presidents we've had. I think in terms of Vice President Harris, I think it is really clear. It's obvious the historic, potentially glass barrier shattering nature of her candidacy and, of course, her potential ascension here into the presidency. And as for former President Trump, of course, he's trying to make a bit of history as well. Grover Cleveland is the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. He is trying to now become, of course, the second. So a lot of history on the line. Of course, if Donald Trump does lose the election, he would be the only major party candidate in history to lose the popular vote 3 times. So a bit of history on all sides. Donald Trump would like to stay out of that little bit of a historical conversation. But regardless, every election is of a historic nature, and today is no exception.
What are the polls indicating to you right now?
Oh, man, a 50-50 split. I know that sounds like I'm bailing on that answer, but I woke up this morning. I was stunned to see Nate Silver at 538 said last night we ran 80,000 simulations. Vice President Harris wins 40,012. That is about as close to a 50-50 split as you could possibly imagine. And of course, you know, it's difficult to separate. Is this a 50-50 split nationwide? Is it a 50-50 split in these battleground states? I give pollsters a big break. I know people like to criticize the polling industry and say, well, they're very rarely are they accurate, but it's so difficult, so many different anomalous factors at play. It is truly a coin flip. I think that's been the case all year, and I sit here today, I have no reason to think it's anything other than that.
So with the race, JD, being as tight as it is, how long could it take to determine a winner?
Well, we all remember back to 2020. We didn't have an answer announced until that Saturday morning. Not my expectation this time. We do not have the historic surge in mail-in voting, a pandemic election this time around. It's much more likely we're going to get an answer, perhaps even as early as, very late tonight or into tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon. It's interesting to note some of the states, of course, you go state by state, some locations, have been able to count some of those mail-in votes ahead of time. Others like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, they can't count those until today. So we'll get certain states called a little bit earlier, and some of them, unfortunately, we'll just kind of have to wait and see. But I don't expect the big drawn-out process we had 4 years ago.
Yes, that was a very unique time, of course, during COVID. and of course, everything that was unfolding in the nation. But I do want to talk about these battleground states, right? They are so crucial to this particular race. Which states could give us an early indication as to how the outcome might unfold?
I think Georgia is going to be the really interesting one to watch. Polls close there in Georgia at 7 o'clock, and they've been able to process some of those absentee and mail-in ballots. So if there's a crucial swing state, a battleground state up for grabs that'll give us an early indication, look for Georgia at 7 o'clock. Look for North Carolina at 7:30. And then as you get a little bit later in the night at 8 o'clock, we'll get Florida and Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Arizona a little bit later at 9 o'clock. Nevada a little bit later in the night, closer to 10 o'clock here local time. But Georgia's going to tell us a lot of information. We're going to know a lot by 7:15 here on the East Coast, I suspect.
Okay, that is the money mark, 7:15
sure.
p.m. Eastern. JD, I'm holding you accountable for that. You are our political expert and know so much about this space. What are the candidates doing today?
President Trump is set to host a big election night. He hopes to be a celebratory nature down in Florida. We expect Senator J.D. Vance, of course, his presidential candidate, to join him there as well. We talked about these key 7 swing states, including Arizona and North Carolina. Vice President Harris is set to do radio interviews, local news radio interviews in all 7 of those battleground states later on throughout the day today. She will be holding her election, what she hopes is a party, at her alma mater in Washington, D.C. at Howard University, and we know that her vice presidential pick, the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, is set to join her there after hitting a couple swing states earlier in the day. So I think at this point, the candidates are saying, hey, we've kind of gone everywhere that we can, some last minute messaging. Look for social media to be as buzzy and busy as it's ever been before both candidates descend on D.C. and Florida, respectively, for their nighttime events.
We might have time to talk about social media in a moment, but I do want to talk about the nature of this particular race, right? I saw yesterday almost 80 million Americans have actually voted early. How does that play into what could unfold today, and who is left to show up?
If we went by the 2020 numbers, I think we can expect there to almost be another 70 million or so people. I was one of them. I was online in my district in Queens this morning at 5:45, and there was a really long line. So a lot of people have kind of put this off until today, understandably. So election experts don't expect us overall to have the total numbers that we had in 2020, which is interesting. 2020, the anomalous election, the pandemic, we had 155 million Americans show out to vote. That's about 2/3 of all eligible voters. That's the high mark for the modern era of presidential elections. And of course, in 2016, it was closer to about 60% of eligible voters. Election experts say, look for that number to be somewhere in the middle there, maybe about 140, 145 million. So that still leaves us about 70 million and change of people who are going to show up. And of course, we like to stress, you know, if you're online or you're still in line there, you have a right to vote no matter where you are. I always like to stress all votes matter. Unfortunately, the reality for the Electoral College is that some votes kind of matter more, and that's why we're really drilling down on those 7 states in particular today.
Are there any electoral areas that you think will be crucial in today's race?
Like in terms of individual states, I'll tell you, my favorite county is Northampton County, Pennsylvania. I don't know if that's exactly what you're asking, but if I had to pick one place to be, what's one little area to focus on? It's the stretch of eastern Pennsylvania between Bethlehem and Easton and the surrounding kind of more rural areas around there. It is the ultimate bellwether. It correctly chose Barack Obama as president. It pivoted to Donald Trump. It pivoted back to Joe Biden, and it's right over the border from New Jersey. We know both campaigns have done a ton of work, Kristen, the last few weeks to try and get out the vote there in Northampton County. So if there's one place that I'm really watching to see, what could we learn when polls close there in the Commonwealth? Keep your eyes locked on Northampton County. But you know I love the county studies. You get really into the map, and it really gives you a good view of what's going on the ground level.
I know that you know that well, JD Durkin. We so appreciate your time, of course, this week, and especially today. That is JD Durkin, contributor for CBS News.
Thanks.
All right, well, stay with us because up next, Hyatt Hotels is going to make its way to the opening bell podium as this trading day is set to start. And before the bell, we're going to head down to the trading floor where Trinity Chavez will be joined by a special guest. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Isabella Bazone with Fixed Income in Focus. Today, I am pleased to have with me Laurent Poyac, Group CEO at Millennium Advisors. Laurent, in the world of credit, we've seen a lot of change in market structure in the last 10 years with the growth of algo trading and all-to-all platforms. How have these new developments affected liquidity in fixed income markets?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Isabella. You have run a very good program. I'm pleased to be here. I'm going to share my perspective as a prop trading firm that has acted as an alternative liquidity providers in fixed income. Yes, market evolution has really transformed our markets for the last 10 plus years. With the advance of algo trading, we've seen a lot more participants. Now, every single investment bank and have an algo desk, as well as alternative liquidity providers like prop firms are very active in the algo trading space. With more data and the usability of AI in those markets, algo trading firm has created a lot of value. But what we found is that the liquidity they provide is really robust, mostly in a low volatility environment. All-to-all platforms have also expanded, and there's more than one platform today, and it's really blurred the line between the buy side and the sell side. But again, liquidity has been strong, mostly during low volatility environment. At time of market disruptions, that's where we see the weakness of these evolutions. You know, we all say that in the credit markets, liquidity is a mile wide and an inch deep. And at Millennium, we approach it a bit differently. We use algorithms to help us making decisions, but our model is really more trader-centric. And we use automations to help our people make faster and better decisions and respond.
Good morning and welcome back to NYSE TV Live. I'm Kristen Schiller here in studio. Well, as Hyatt Hotels prepares to ring the opening bell, we want to take a look at corporate travel. And for that, I want to bring in Trinity Chavez, who joins on the floor with more. Trinity, good morning.
Good morning, Kristen. Yeah, there's a lot happening in business travel right now, and as companies look to balance budgets amid rising costs and evolving travel demands, joining me to break this all down and the biggest trends impacting this sector and how companies are adapting is the CEO of Navan Expense, the all-in-one solution for travel, corporate cards, and expense management. And they're actually, well, Hyatt is actually one of their partners as well. So Michael Sindicic, he is the CEO again of Navan Expense. Michael, I do want to talk about the biggest trends right now that we're seeing impacting the corporate travel landscape, especially post-COVID.
Yeah, well, Navan powers travel and expense management for more than 11,000 global enterprises. So we have access to tons and tons of data. And what we actually see is the cohort from 2019 are actually traveling about 18% more than they were in 2019 to today in 2024. So while people were saying business travel may never return or come back, it is completely roaring right now.
But what would you say are the biggest differences? I know you and I had talked about this a little bit in Vegas for Money 2020, just about the uptick has been significantly increased since 2019 to modern day. So talk to me about those key findings.
Well, if we look at the trends, so what we see is actually office visits are up by about 5% of a share of why people are actually traveling on behalf of their company. We see meeting customers is completely back. It's about 1 out of every 3 or 4 trips is going out to meet a customer or a partner and close a deal or implement a solution. And we actually see also conference season is in full effect, and conference travel is actually up by 3% from 2019 to today. So everyone's getting back on the road. We actually think that part of the reason why travel is actually up is during the pandemic, a lot of companies were hiring employees remotely. And now what they're doing is they're bringing people back into the office. They're having offsites. They're doing things like that to bring the teams back together as people have been a little bit more remote across the company.
But we are seeing certain trends change a little bit when it comes to corporate travel. You were mentioning earlier how people are tagging on personal travel trips to their corporate travel trips. We're seeing more long weekends. We're seeing a longer trip duration. Talk to me about that.
That's right. So we see that consumer travel is softening a little bit while business travel is roaring back. And what we actually see year over year is 4 times as often business travelers are actually tacking on personal travel bookings. So they're staying for an extended weekend or they're going a few days early. So it's a trend that we call bleisure, where you're mixing both business travel and consumer travel. And that seems to be having a pretty major uptick right now.
How do you follow those key differentiations? How do you know which one is personal, which one is travel through your platforms?
Well, in Navan, when we actually pay your employees to save money. And what you can then do is you can use those rewards to book personal travel in the Navan platform. And so if you're already staying somewhere for work and you want to extend a day or two from your hotel, or you want to book a personal travel or a flight in between your work trip, you can actually do that on our platform. So that allows us to get key insights across business travel and personal travel as well.
And how are businesses and companies adapting to budget constraints when it comes to these corporate travel trips, whether it's a team offsite or team meetings or even just to meet clients?
Well, I'll give you a few stats first. So what we see is base flight prices are actually up 19% from 2019 to today. So we see inflation in effect here. We also see hotel bookings and spend is up about 14% on base prices since 2019. And year over year, it's about 5 or 6%. And we see a similar trend. You know, Starbucks is the most popular vendor when people are traveling for work. And we see actually year over year, the average price is up about 5%. So prices are increasing. And then what businesses are looking to do or doing in our platform is they're typically encouraging or putting policies that you book further in advance, for example, that can save money. Or you actually need to put, rationale why and justify the reason and make sure that it's a valid business trip. So that way you know that you're spending your company's money effectively.
Now, I would be remiss if I didn't talk to you about the election that's happening today. Obviously, this is election day. So how are companies, in your vantage point, positioning themselves for potential policy change with the new administration potentially?
Well, we've seen tons of different administrations, right? So whether it's Republican or Democratic, businesses need to get out there, they need to keep showing profits, they need to close deals, and they need to be efficient with their travel and expense budgets. And that's exactly what Navan is here to provide. So I think, regardless of who ends up winning, I think businesses will continue to travel as they've been doing throughout the different administrations in the past. Now, sometimes they might need to control policy a little better if prices go crazy, or they might need to, in fact, expand their travel if we see that business is roaring back.
Now, we're seeing the hybrid model become increasingly popular when it comes to businesses around the world. How has that impacted Navan Expense, if at all?
Well, what we firmly believe that doing this, being in person, is valuable and really, really important. And so even though, during the pandemic, people were saying business travel may never come back, we doubled down and we kept on going. And now we see that that's in full effect. So what we think and we firmly believe is that the power of these in-person connections is extremely powerful, whether that's going to meet a customer or partner or bringing your teams together as they've been hybrid to build culture and really build trust and work with each other. So we think that business travel will continue to resume.
And I know that we were talking a little bit about how Hyatt is one of the partners for Navan, but talk to me about what's next for your company.
Well, Navan is continuing to expand globally, upmarket and downmarket. So we already support over 11,000 global enterprises around the world. We're doubling down on the EMEA markets, going into APAC and continuing to expand so that more and more customers can have the goodness of Navan travel and expense management software. So that's our mission, and we're going to continue on that journey.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on NYSE TV Live. Michael, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Michael Sindicic, again, he is the CEO of Navan Expense. I'm going to bring in Kristen again because she has more from the studio.
Trinity, thank you. That's right. So we are awaiting this opening bell from Hyatt Hotels. You can see the signage behind me, set to celebrate and open the markets on this election day. A company that's been listed here on the stock exchange since 2009 under the ticker symbol H. Its portfolio includes more than 1,000 hotels and all-inclusive properties in over 75 countries across 6 continents. Well, the bell ringer has served as the chief executive officer and the president since 2006. And this company is celebrating, of course, the opening bell as we see many different companies in the travel space report earnings during this peak reporting season. Well, we are, of course, awaiting what could be a very busy day down here on the floor of the stock exchange, in addition to a busy week. We are awaiting the election results. Earnings continue to come in. And, of course, we have that Fed decision on Thursday. I think my colleague Trinity Chavez is back down on the floor. Trinity, what is the pulse on the floor leading into the opening bell?
I do have to say, Kristen, things are pretty calm on the floor right now. I was speaking to some of the designated market makers and the traders, and they said the sentiment again has been pretty calm. Everyone is pretty much on high alert as we await these election results. And, you know, the outcome of that is obviously going to impact markets, but investors right now are just on the lookout for what we can expect from the outcome of this election. So right now we're seeing about dozens of Hyatt customers, employees, and just team members here ready to support them, celebrating 15 years here at the New York Stock Exchange. We're going to see the executive team head up to the Bell Podium and open up the U.S. equity markets in just about 10 seconds.
All right, Trinity, well, we are taking a live look here at that podium as we await the opening bell, and of course, stocks pointing to a fractionally higher open. Let's take a listen. All right, we are off to the races here on this election day. Stocks opening fractionally higher as we wait to see how the balance of power unfolds in Washington. 7:15 p.m. Eastern might be the telling point, according to our political expert, J.D. Durkin, who joined earlier. And now to talk more about markets, how today could impact stocks going forward. I'm rejoined by Sam Stovall. He's a chief investment strategist at CFRA. Sam, it's great to have you on the show. And with stocks opening with sort of a muted reaction at first, what do you anticipate could unfold in today's session?
Well, Kristen, I think that we'll probably see a very tight trading range with the market swinging positive and negative because really nobody knows what the outcome is going to be. Certainly not today. Maybe get a better feel after the market is closed later today, but really no conclusion to this whole election until the latter part of this week.
And in terms of which sectors might be impacted most by the results, Sam, which ones are on your radar?
Well, should we get a Harris victory, the positive groups are likely to be your healthcare insurers and hospitals because they would continue to benefit from an extension of the Obamacare subsidies. The electric vehicle, auto manufacturers, the energy areas where it's clean energy producers like wind, solar, geothermal, and also apparel retailers because the lack of a tariff wall being erected as the re-election of President Trump would imply would be beneficial to these apparel retailers. The large banks, however, pharmaceuticals would probably end up being hurt under a Harris presidency because of adoption of Basel III with the banks, more regulation in terms of drug prices from the pharmaceuticals, and also essentially just more regulation on industries. Flip side is what you would get with a re-election of Donald Trump. The large banks, pharmacies, as well as natural gas companies would do well because of the lifting of the halt on LNG exports.
Interesting. Now, I want to ask about the economy because I had seen a story in the Wall Street Journal in the past week, Sam, that said that economists think that Kamala Harris's economic policy would lead to more growth, whereas voters, the average Joe, might think that former President Trump could lead to more economic growth. Do you have a take on this?
Well, our feeling is that if we're going to be seeing tariff be President Trump's favorite word, then that could certainly halt or at least slow a lot of global trade. In many ways, reminds me of the Smoot-Hawley tariff of 1930 that many can point to say contributed to the global recession/depression. So if we end up picking fights with all of our trade partners, that would not be a good thing. Also, the independent parties have estimated that a Trump policy would add $7.5 trillion to the deficit and debt, whereas under a Harris administration, it would be about half that. So still, both would be adding stimulus, adding subsidies and whatnot that will be increasing the debt, which is something we would have to address down the road.
Mm-hmm. Sam Stovall, great to get your take, especially on this historic day as we wait to see how it plays out in America. Sam's a chief investment strategist at CFRA. All right, well, stay with us because up next we will talk markets overseas, specifically in Europe, and how the venture capital world is preparing amid today's U.S. election. The CEO of a publicly traded VC firm will join us live.
Technology is very important to us. Actually, we are one of the first companies in the industry to fully adopt cloud-based software applications.
Stephen, it is wonderful to have you on Floor Talk here at NYSE International Day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So now, I want to start off by talking about the company. Tell me about NYSE.
Thank you. So we are NYSE, short for CYYS. We are China's largest freshly made tea drink company. So we are directly operated. Currently, we have 900 stores across the country with more than 6,000 employees. So we were founded in 2013 in Changsha City from China. So on top of the fresh made drinks, we also offer lifestyle retail products like these ones. So we started offering them since 2020. Right now, it contributes to more than 30% of our total sales. To my knowledge, that is the highest in the industry.
Now tell me, how does technology drive the customer experience?
Technology is very important to us. Actually, we are one of the first companies in the industry to fully adopt cloud-based software applications. Just to give you an example, so people are familiar with the Starbucks apps. There are a lot of functionality in it. So we also have a similar WeChat mini program in China. So for example, if a customer is interested in to buy one of these retail products, they can use our WeChat mini program to search exactly which store has the inventory. And once they find it, they will be able to either to buy it or they can.
Welcome back to NYSE TV Live, everyone. I'm Kristen Scholler here in studio. Well, as U.S. stock trading gets underway on this election day, we want to check in on overseas markets, too. One company is uniquely prepared to discuss them as it is a publicly traded VC firm investing in private companies. Trinity Chavez joins me now with more. Hi, Trinity.
Hey, Kristen. That's right. Molten Ventures is one of Europe's leading venture firms, driving some of the biggest AI investment trends in the region. They recently launched a film envisioning a future shaped by the portfolio's success, brought to life using, well, generative AI. Here to discuss the inspiration behind the film, the top industry trends, and how the U.S. election might impact European tech, I am joined now by Ben Wilkinson. He is the CEO of Molten Ventures. Good morning, Ben.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So I do want to talk about how Molten Ventures has been at the forefront of European tech investing since your IPO in 2016 as Draper Esprit. So what are the biggest trends you're seeing right now across the European market when it comes to AI investment opportunities?
Well, I think the AI opportunities are profound across the world, and in Europe we are also seeing the benefits of that with our founders that are investing in these areas, but also driving the innovation that's occurring. We wanted to use this film as an opportunity to demonstrate that by adding capital and expertise, we can show how the technology can be used in a day-to-day use case. And we did that by asking our CEOs in our CEO summit that we run every year what success would look like to them. And we allowed the answers of that to drive the outputs of this film that we'll hopefully see. And that's really underpinned by AI as a use case. And I think it's those use cases where we'll see the productivity being driven, but also the investment returns being accrued from as well.
Are you seeing any specific sectors where tech is advancing more in Europe than other regions?
I think Europe has always had a strong development of IP, and we've seen that across obviously healthcare sectors. We're seeing it in space technology, and we've also seen it in semiconductors, which obviously feeds into a global supply chain. But I think Europe has the founders that can expand globally. They've demonstrated that coming into US markets as a big consumer market. But certainly those areas that I've outlined there will be key areas. And within our portfolio, we've had companies that are doing breast cancer surgery, some medical devices that have performed very well, and more recently drone delivery, revolutionizing transportation. So these are just a few of the areas that we're seeing and they're reflected in our video also. And I think given the history of the London markets, obviously financial technology is a key pillar of what we invest in, but also where the innovation is coming through from.
And it's a big day here in the U.S. with the election. What do you think will be the impact for European tech, but also for the AI investment landscape in Europe?
It is a big day and it's an exciting time. We're obviously all watching everything very closely. I think the benefit of looking to 2054, as our film does, is to really demonstrate that the entrepreneurs who are creating companies every day, not just on any one particular event, and also engaging with their consumers every single day, drive innovation. We chose a 30-year lens because if we look back 30 years, that was when the World Wide Web was transforming, and it's those tech innovations that really demonstrate changes in people's day-to-day lives. So we're looking at those longer-term trends and making sure that the technology that's driving those is being reflected in this video.
And I do want to talk more about how you used AI in this video to help tell the story of 30 years from now through the success of your portfolio.
Yeah, it was like all good stories, this has its own story. The creation was 14 separate AI applications. We think that this probably would not have been possible to do last year. We collaborated with a creative shop called Busker Video, and they were able to pull together, through interviews with some of our team, Leonora and George are reflected in this, and age in their profiles 30 years. And then we're able to do all the montages with AI also. So 14 separate applications that were available. It was tough to do now, but we were able to do it. I think next year this will just become very, very easy in itself, and it's showing how quickly technology is able to advance and how quickly the technology is accelerating the use cases as well.
Amazing. Well, you know what, Ben Wilkinson, again, CEO of Molten Ventures, thank you so much for joining us on the show. But I do think that we should show our viewers this video that we have been talking so much about. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
30 years ago, many people believed we had reached the limits of what humans were capable of achieving.
I guess it's not like those people lacked for evidence. CO2 emissions were increasing and the global temperature was warming. There also did seem to be more human conflict being fed to us through different media sources.
But beneath that noise was a more quiet, more positive, more audacious future being created.
The evidence showed that technology was a tool that solved many of the problems humanity created for itself. That as societies and economies developed, they had less impact on the environment while offering more prosperity to more people.
That the genius of all humanity was to work together to solve problems and create a better world. That entrepreneurship was a way to bring like-minded and passionate people together.
30 years ago, the business that we helped build was still young. We were growing and we seemed to be doing pretty well. But I don't think any of us could have imagined what we'd become today.
So many of the companies Molten backed have become part of the fabric of this world, solving problems large and small. As we invested and grew over the last 30 years, we backed amazing startups and supported those investors who backed us. Molten became a bridge to the future for dedicated, visionary entrepreneurs and everyday investors alike.
Their prosperity was ours, and our prosperity was theirs. We're so proud of all we've done together.
This may seem like a crazy vision.
30 years may seem a long way off.
But it's closer than you think. Make more possible.
You know, you think about it, providing energy does improve lives. Your life gets pretty miserable pretty fast if the lights go out, if you can't get the fuel you need to get from point A to point B, groceries don't show up on the shelves, you can't get your kids to school. It's a tough life without energy. And so our mission is to make sure that people have access to the energy and the materials they need to have a great lifestyle, to have a sustainable lifestyle. And over the years, we know that it's going to evolve. The kind of energy we may be providing to improve people's lives may evolve from what we do today, but we're committed to ensure that people have access to low-cost, affordable, sustainable, abundant energy, just like we've done for the last 125 plus years. Pinnacle really epitomizes the perfect opportunity for us because it sat right next to our backbone, our trunk lines. It had a brand new state-of-the-art gathering and processing facility that could process 200 million standard cubic feet a day of gas. And it had plans for another one and the utilities in place for another one. And there's room for even more expansion. So we could do an inorganic acquisition that allowed us to do more organic growth over the long term. And so we were able to buy it at a very reasonable value and create even more value by expanding it over time. Today, we're now processing 50,000 barrels a day, give or take a little bit, of renewable feedstocks with low carbon intensity, and we're selling it as renewable diesel direct to customers at our 76 stations in California and other locations on the West Coast. And we're now starting to build inventory of renewable jet fuel that can be blended with traditional jet fuel and marketed as sustainable aviation fuel. So we're well off to a good start with our rodeo.
Welcome back to NYSE TV Live. I'm Trinity Chavez on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. And you know, as we near the final hours of Election Day, government officials are on high alert for misinformation, including deepfakes. Digital media like videos or audio that have been altered using artificial intelligence to make them look or sound real, but they're actually not. To talk more about this and how prevalent this problem is in the U.S. and far beyond, as well as how companies are staying ahead, is Vijay Balasubramanian. He is the co-founder and CEO of Pindrop. Good morning, Vijay.
Good morning, Trinity. Thanks for having me on Election Day.
It's a very important day. So this is a very important topic that we do want to talk to you about. You know, with the rise of deepfake technology, how prevalent, first, do you believe this problem is and has become in the context of misinformation, especially during critical events like Election Day?
Yeah, it's become very prevalent. You know, at the beginning of this year, as you know, we had the first case of deepfake with President Joe Biden supposedly calling voters in New Hampshire, asking them not to vote and save their vote for today. Clearly, that wasn't President Joe Biden. We're the ones who identified it, identified the AI applications. But we've seen increasing amount of these deepfake videos And most studies say there's been a 550% increase in the amount of deepfake video. And we're seeing this even in local races where candidates are supposedly dropping out when they never did. But we're also seeing it in all other walks of life. So, for example, we're seeing Justin Bieber releasing songs that he never released, LeBron James criticizing his coach, which he never did, and Elon Musk running cryptocurrency scams, which he never did. And so, there's a lot of misinformation, both in terms of the election and just in general. And this is something deepfakes has brought to the table, and we need to protect against it.
And you bring up a lot of good points, but what specific challenges do deepfakes present to businesses and government entities in terms of security and trust, specifically in communication and verification processes?
Yeah, deepfakes break all online trust. First, businesses can no longer trust individuals because when you call a business or when you interact with a business remotely, they don't know whether they're talking to a real human. And we've seen a 1,400% increase in the amount of attacks using deepfakes against businesses. We talked about the fact that there's rampant misinformation. So individuals can't trust information either on social media platforms or on news media platforms. And then finally, on the communication side, we're seeing deepfakes steal as much as $25 million because a finance exec got on a call thinking he was talking to a CFO, wasn't talking to a CFO, but it happened to be a deep fake of him. And we're seeing this even with elder citizens being called, asking to pay ransom for their grandkids. And clearly their grandkids weren't in trouble. It was just a deep fake of the grandkid.
And this is obviously something that Pindrop specializes in. So talk to me about how your company is leveraging its technology to help combat misinformation and deepfake threats. And can you share any specific initiative approaches that you're implementing?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the big areas that we play is in the commerce side, where we're protecting 8 of the top 10 banks, 5 of the top 7 insurances, and some of the biggest retail and healthcare providers. So when they get deep fake calls, we're protecting them with our technology, which is known as liveness detection, which is our ability to say, is this a real human or not? We're doing this in the media side of things with partnerships with media companies like True Media, where they upload audio videos to us and we're able to tell them, is it a deep fake or not? And 46% of videos that are getting uploaded are actually deep faked. And then we're also doing it with regular consumers. We're partnering with companies like Umail, where we're looking at robocalls and creating essentially something like an election defense fund or an election defense grid, where we're trying to protect regular consumers from robocalls which have deep fakes in them.
Well, thank you so much, Vijay, again for joining us on NYSE TV Live. We look forward to having you back on soon.
Thank you so much, Trinity. It was a blast.
Now we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, Kristen will be speaking with Kathleen McGrath. She is the Director of Public Information for New York State Board of Elections. She's going to tell us everything that we need to know about Election Day.
At Augury, we work with the largest manufacturing and industrial companies in the world to make their production lines more reliable, more productive, and more sustainable. And we do this by infusing every layer of the manufacturing stack with AI and digital solutions, starting from machine health, which is the maintenance and reliability aspects, as well as process health, which is process optimizations. How do I manufacture quality product? How do I reduce the waste? The energy consumption of my lines.
And speaking of machine health, let's talk about Augury's machine health since raising $180 million in funding.
I mentioned we work with the largest companies, and what we've learned through the years is that the problem that we solve, machine health, is not just maintenance and reliability, it's a supply chain resiliency problem, right? It's a sustainability problem, a talent shortage, an upskilling problem. And add to that the geopolitical tensions that we're living in, the environmental challenges that we're facing. I think the industry today understands that we have to fundamentally transform how manufacturing is being done, right? And as I mentioned, how do we bring AI and digital solutions to every single layer of the manufacturing stack? So what the funding enabled us to do in the past 3 years is not only continue growing our business, right? So today we're We're working in over 40 countries, as an example. We entered new segments with our partner Baker Hughes. We went into oil and gas and the energy sector. But on top of that, it enabled us to be bolder, right? To be that partner for our customers that helps them address the key challenges of AI and digital manufacturing in general.
Are there any specific technological advancements that Augury is focusing on to help enhance the production of health diagnostics?
Yeah, so we're always looking for ways to increase the coverage of how do we support more machines, more manufacturing.
Welcome back to NYSE TV Live, everyone. I'm Kristen Schuller here in studio. Well, election polls opened at 6 a.m. Eastern time today in the tri-state area spanning New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And as voters across the country head to the polls, I want to bring in an election official for everything that we need to know on this final day to cast your ballot in the 2024 race. Joining me now with more is Kathleen McGrath, Director of Public Information for the New York State Board of Elections. Kathleen, great to see you early this morning. Thank you so much for joining. And for anyone who hasn't yet cast their ballot in New York, how can they find their polling site today?
Good morning, Kristen. Thank you for having me back. Yes, today is election day. It's exciting across the country. In New York State, polls opened at 6 a.m. and they'll be open till 9 p.m. For anyone wondering where they need to go vote, they can use the State Board of Elections voter lookup tool at voterlookup.elections.ny.gov. Put in their information for where they live, and they'll be able to be told where their poll site is.
In terms of coming prepared to the polls, Kathleen, what would you recommend to our viewers?
Well, we've certainly seen high turnout all throughout the 9 days of early voting in New York State. We had just shy of 3 million New Yorkers take advantage of early voting, and now we have Election Day. So you may encounter a line at your poll site. We just encourage New Yorkers to maybe pack a little bit of patience. Remember, the poll workers are your friends and neighbors who have shown up to serve their communities and help them vote today. So if you encounter a line, just be a little patient. Other than that, you're going to be checked in at the poll books where you confirm your identity and then be given your ballot to complete and scan in.
When can we expect the first results from New York State to come out?
So the first batch of results will come after the polls close tonight at 9 p.m. These first results will include the machine totals from Election Day, as well as the machines during early voting, as well as any mail ballots that have been able to be processed up until now by the county boards. We strongly encourage voters, though, to not assume that these results are complete or official. In fact, they are incomplete and unofficial. They're just the election night reporting, but it'll give you an idea of the results of the election right away.
How do you ensure election security today?
We in New York State, at all the county boards and the state board, we think about election security 365 days a year. Our elections are incredibly secure when it comes to voter registration and the identification, verification that's involved in that, as well as the voting process. All the voting machines and technology that are used in New York State have to be certified by the state board after being tested by an independent federal lab. There's also testing that happens when the machines arrive in terms of logic and accuracy testing, pre-election testing, post-election testing, to make sure that all the tabulation is done correctly.
All right, Kathleen McGrath, Director of Public Information for the New York State Board of Elections, thank you so much for joining, of course, on this very important day here in America. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Kristen. Have a great election day.
You too. All right, well, Intercontinental Exchange and the NYSE encourage you to vote if you haven't already in what will be one of the most historic races of our lifetimes. It's going to do it for today's coverage on NYSE TV Live. I'm Kristen Schuller. Have a great election day.
We achieve greatness.
A house divided against itself cannot stand.
Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
In life, I'm reminded that it's not about the destination, it is truly about the journey.
My pleasure to greet you today from the center of the U.S. capital markets here at the New York Stock Exchange.
I want to just take a minute and not just talk to the people that are in the room, but I want to speak to the rest of the team around the globe. These are people that made this happen, and I know that there is no way we would be here if it wasn't for you.
Everyone at Flutter is proud to join such a distinguished list of companies on this great stock exchange.
Not many people get to do something big in this world, and we get to do something truly special.
This is such a wonderful place to both look back and look forward. Look how far we have come. I'm so optimistic about what lies ahead.